Hello, I am Tara.
And I'm Mike.
And I'm Jill.
We are doing Mom's story about how she raised 500 kids. Oh my goodness.
500.
Yeah, that would
prolific.
be a story. How she raised 2 kids on $500 a month. She really did do it. And now we're at the part of the story where she was earning $1,000 a month working 3 jobs. She was spending $500 a month paying off her bills and living on $500 a month, paying off my dad's debts more specifically, and spent the other $500 for our living expenses. Our house payment was about $100. And then we had other, car, all that food, all that kind of stuff. So she is telling, at this point, we've lost count. We're at number 15 or 16, I don't know. But she's made the decision to divorce Dad. Dad has made the announcement that he's leaving the state when he said he wasn't going to. And go, Mom.
He moved at this point. He's gone ahead and moved. And so now things are really interesting because I have zero support. In an emergency, I had nobody to really call too much. To get repair work done around the house, if something broke down, he'd always at least fixed it for us. And at this point, I couldn't afford to have anybody come fix anything, couldn't do that. I have to figure out how to fix it myself. And it just kind of put things in a little bit of a tailspin when he moved out of state. So I got to tell you, there's one story. Things kept breaking down. It's like inevitable. Now I have things going wrong for some reason in the house, different things. And I came home from work one day. I had to go to the bathroom so bad that I didn't want to take time at work. I just wanted to hurry and get home. And so I'm running through the house to get in there to use the bathroom. And I'm not sure if the juggling on the floor with me running or what caused this, but I burst through the bathroom door and boom, water starts spraying everywhere. I mean, it's just soaking me. It's soaking the bathroom. I had that fuzzy flocked wallpaper that it was soaking all of that. And what happened was we had a clawfoot tub. And for those of you that don't know, clawfoot tubs have all the pipes exposed on the outside. And one of the pipes had burst loose from that, and it was just saturating the whole room and me. I get over there and grab it. Now, you got to realize I'm in a puddle of water. I'm listening to water, and I'm having to go to the bathroom so bad. So I've got a handicap going here. It wasn't just, it was all I could do to keep from wetting my pants. But I finally get the.
Mike's cringing about now.
I know, because we're talking about potty. We do this to him all the time. He just rolls. It's like, ladies will understand. Guys will just cringe and roll their eyes. But anyway, so I get this pipe shoved back into the faucet, and as long as I hold it, I'm okay. But I can't reach a telephone. The telephone's off in the office, way across the house. And so
we didn't have cordless phones or cell phones back then.
No. And you guys weren't home. I didn't know what to do, because if I let go of the thing, it would just be a big mess. And even by the time I ran to do something, it would flood the whole place. And here I'm wiggling, I've got to go. And I look, and Tara's bedroom hooked up to the bathroom. She had a door that opened into the bathroom from her bedroom. She always picked her room up really nice every day. But there on the floor by the bathroom door, it was about 3 feet maybe away from me. There on the floor, she'd left a pile of books. And so I thought, now this is where you have to, I could never figure things out. If something broke, I could never figure out what to do for stuff. But this is where God was helping me grow a little bit, because as I'm holding on to this, I'm thinking, if I could get those books over there, maybe there's a wall about 4 inches, and then there was a wall, and I could wedge those books in there and keep that pipe from spewing out. So I'm stretching myself out, trying to keep the pipe in, and I'm taking those books with my toe and trying to inch those things over to me. And I'm crossing my legs at the same time, but I get the books over to me, and I get them, and they fit perfect. They couldn't have, I mean, it was like they were made to fit right in there. And so I got them wedged so tight between the wall and the pipe wasn't going anyplace. So here I had this big mess. Well, I didn't know where the shutoff valve was for the water. I thought it was in the basement, but I never had to do it. So ladies, learn where the shutoff valve
Yeah, I don't know
is in
where it
your
is for
house.
this house.
Yeah, see, you need to learn these
Oh,
things.
it's
You
in the
really do.
basement.
So
It's
this
in the
is a
basement,
practical tip. Well, anyway, I finally called that one friend that I had, and she said, asked her if she knew where she thought the shutout valve would be, and she said, she was older than me, and I thought maybe she had a general idea. So she said, well, let me get my husband. And she brought him over. I'd never met the man before. I was so grateful. But he came over and we had to climb over parts and machinery that was stacked in the basement to get back to that silly shutoff valve. But we got it turned off. He fixed the pipe for me because it wasn't too much of a fix. We just had to tighten the nut and everything. And so it was like day after day, I would have things like this going on. Well, one day it was just continue. One day it was Sunday and I was beyond discouraged. I don't know what happened to me. It was like I was feeling sorry for myself. Why is this happening to me? This is unfair. This is wrong. I walked outside. It was so hot. It was like the end of August in Kansas. I couldn't turn the air on because I didn't have money to run it. So I went outside and I thought maybe if I sit on the steps for a minute and cool down, I can collect myself because I could just feel it coming on. I was afraid. I was worried. The whole gamut. I sat on those steps and I looked out, and Tara can tell you for sure. I looked out on my yard. There's something about plumbing, electrical, and yard work that just puts me over the edge. And here was my grass. It was about 12 to 15 inches tall. And I hadn't thought, yeah, look at Michael's face. I hadn't forgotten, I just hadn't thought about it. But this did not help my discouragement. My lawnmower had broken a few weeks before. I had no money to pay to get it fixed. I tried fixing it myself. I couldn't do it. I couldn't afford to pay anybody to mow my yard. And I sat down on those steps and I looked at that ugly, tall grass and I'm thinking, oh yeah, now I'm going to get fined for my grass being too tall. Just lay it on here, God. And I'm crying and I'm wallowing. And I mean, you've never heard anybody going on and on. And, it just dawned on me when I was thinking about doing this. Here it was, just a few months, maybe 8 months or so before that, God's answering my prayer. I'm getting $10,000 on a signature loan. All these miracles are happening. God is great. This is wonderful. I can do anything and conquer the world. And 8 months later, I'm sitting there sobbing and crying. You don't care about me, God, and this is a mess here. I used to think on the Israelites in the Bible. Didn't they remember all those plagues that God brought onto Pharaoh to help them escape? And here it was just a bit later and they were just saying, well, God, you're not there doing anything. I thought, how could they do that after seeing all these great miracles? And here I'm sitting having my pity party, totally forgetting one thing after another that God had done for me. And I knew what I was doing then at this point. I knew what shouldn't be doing it, but I was still doing it. And so finally, after about 15 minutes of my ranting and my crying and my raving and going on, God gave me a verse. It was not the verse I was expecting. Okay. I expected a verse of comfort. I expected a verse of power. I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength. This is the verse I was expecting. Oh no, God didn't give me that verse. He very quietly whispered to me, and this is the weirdest verse to come for this situation. He said, I will not tempt you. I'm just saying the basics. It's in 1 Corinthians 10:13. The basis of it is, I will not tempt you above what you're able, but I will give you a means of escape. And I thought, what an odd verse. why didn't he comfort me? Why didn't he tell me to have power? He told me, I'm not going to tempt you. And for years, I've been in church for years, and that verse, it always meant to me that, okay, if I'm about ready to commit murder,
adultery, pornography,
or sexual or adultery, or if I'm going to
stealing.
steal something, God's going to come in and help pull me away from this, And that's what I always thought this verse stood for. It didn't apply to me because I wasn't going to do anything like that. So this verse, why was he giving me this verse? I was sinning. I was having a pity party. That's adultery. I was just, self-pity was just all over. I was worried. I was anxious. I was fearful. I was just everywhere. But he gave me that verse and he said it again. And I thought, you know what? He promised me. I'm claiming this promise. I didn't fluff it off. I said, all right, this is what you told me, and I'm going to claim it. And you're not going to tempt me beyond what I'm able, and I'm right there on the edge, standing ready to step over the cliff. And dear God, you better get this promise kicked in really fast because I'm slipping here. And at that point, we don't realize God wants us to claim those promises. We don't get our prayers answered because we don't claim them half the time. But I claimed it. Now, nothing changed. I was still frustrated and wallowing, and my emotions were a mess. Nothing changed. God had his job, though. We got to realize God has his part, but I had my part. And I stood up on those steps, and I walked in, and I started cleaning my messy kitchen. Now, I could have sat there and thought, okay, I'm waiting, dear God. But that wouldn't have been right. I needed to do my part. I needed to stand up. Because that spot on those steps was my wallowing spot. And I had to remove myself from that spot and show God that I was going to trust him. I didn't feel it. I felt nothing. I was just as mad, just as angry, and I didn't feel any change. But my will was, I was going to claim that promise and I was going to trust him. I don't care what happened. I was going to do it. And I stood up and went in. It's kind of like Joseph, when Potiphar's wife was coming to seduce him and he just ran. He knew he had to get out of there. And
Go ahead. I got something to say.
And so I knew that. What was you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, one time a person told me, and I thought this was very interesting. Every time someone was put in a temptation of sin, like Joseph in the Bible, they ran from this temptation. They didn't sit there and pray. They didn't sit there and sing their hymns. They ran.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very interesting observation. And the same is true with that. You didn't sit there and sing your hymns and praises, and you didn't sit there and pray and pray and pray. You got up and ran and started doing something.
Went into the house, yes. And because with every spiritual thing, I heard recently, with every spiritual thing that you put into practice, there's a physical aspect of it that you have to do yourself, God has his part, I had my part. And by standing up and going, it was like leaving it there, and I was trusting him. So I get into the kitchen, and I'm still banging pots around and splashing the water because, your emotions don't always click right away. Sometimes they do. Sometimes I have total peace and it's gone. But this was one of those times, and it was good because I learned a lesson in this. So I'm just 15, 20 minutes, I'm just doing all this kitchen. It was a really dirty kitchen that day. I kept cleaning, but I could hear lawnmower in the back of my foggy brain, miserable filled brain, at this point. I could hear lawnmower going, but it was Sunday, and it was summer. I didn't think too much about it. But pretty soon that lawnmower was right on my front yard, or, like my front door. And I thought, what in the world? So I thought, what is going on out there? And I went out to the front door and looked. My yard was totally mowed. Completely mowed. And here stood this man God had done his part. Here stood this man. I didn't hardly know this guy. I call him a neighbor, but really he had rental homes that he rented way down the block. I'd lived there 15 years at this point. I'd only met this man really officially once. I'd seen him talking to Dad one time for a couple of minutes out front. And then the second time I talked to him, and Dad had introduced us, and he just owned these houses, and he'd come check on them every couple of years. So it wasn't like he was even really a neighbor that I knew. And I thanked him profusely. I told him, I said, my lawnmower's broken. I appreciate it. He said, well, you always keep your yard up so nice. Well, Tara wouldn't say it was nice, but I kept it mowed.
Well, you always keep it neat.
I do.
Yes.
It's not the best. I do the best I can.
Yes.
And so he said, it's always so nice. And he said, I figured I knew your husband was gone, and I figured something must be wrong. So he said, I just wanted to come on down and mow it for you. And I thanked him again, and I said, I just really appreciate it. He said, well, listen, come with me and let me show you where I keep this lawnmower. And he took me down and showed me the lean-to. He put the lawnmower in, and he said, anytime you need it now, until you get your lawnmower fixed, you just come use this thing. There's the gas can. I don't want you putting gas in it even. You just come get this lawnmower when you think you need to mow your yard and do it. And so I thanked him again. And I'm telling you about this man in this episode because he comes into our lives again a little bit later, and in a very interesting way that has a big impact on us, and something that I'd struggled with for years. But this guy, I always call him my guardian angel, and I got to thinking years later, how did he know Dad was gone? How did he know? I didn't know any of the neighbors to speak to any of them. Dad didn't know this man. And I, to this day, could not figure out how he knew that Dad was no longer there. It was really kind of, that part was a little bit odd to me. So I just wanted to tell you that because to teach you that sometimes your emotions don't always click. And I had bad days. People think, oh, I just maybe sailed along. And these days I have bad days. One thing good though, they're farther apart. They're not as intense. And I know now, how to take care of it. Now, it's kind of like, how do I want to explain this? We don't realize how much God loves us, and he doesn't demand more of us. It's like he said, he doesn't tempt us above what we are able, or allow us to be tempted above what we are able. And it's kind of like a child, and the 3-year-old comes and says, Mom, I cleaned your bedroom. I cleaned the bedroom, and you go in there, the bedroom was shambles, and he's got 4 little toys set on the bottom shelf of his shelving. And he's so proud of himself because he did that because Mom said, clean your bedroom. That was all he could do. Mom says, great job. And she says, let me help you put the stuff on the top shelf. And so he had done his part, and Mom had helped do the other part, and it got the bedroom clean. And God does that in our lives. The child learned responsibility. He learned to keep things clean, and learned to stuff. But at the same time, he knew Mom was there to help him with the stuff he couldn't reach and quite, get. And that's what God taught me on that. And I just wanted to bring that story up. That's to tell you about that. But that was one of a gazillion things. It was just like every week and every day, one more thing. And then we had your knee surgery.
Yeah, I mean, let me just say, we are giving you the very biggest highlights. I mean,
yeah,
we
there's
had
no way we could even cover everything.
So much that literally every single day, and a lot of times every hour, we had what normal people would call major things happening. That's why now I really don't have a lot of sympathy for people. I'm sorry. You would think I would be sympathetic and that kind of thing. But when somebody's car breaks down on the side of the road and they're whining about it, it's like, well, I'm sorry, but, you have a cell phone to call a tow company and you have the money to pay the tow company, and you have the money to fix your car. We didn't have a cell phone to call the tow company. We didn't have the money to fix the car. And it was always stuff, like that happening. And so, we're really giving you the very condensed version, but it was ongoing, and it was all the time. So
yeah, it was just like one thing after another. And so then we had to do your knee surgery, which was interesting. I think your knee surgery was somewhere around, in this time period. And so I got to go back. They had her.
What happened was, I decided I didn't have that many friends at that point. And this one gal, I was kind of friends with her, but not really. And she said, let's go be ball girls for the tennis tournament. I'm like, okay, I had no idea what that was. Well, what it was you had to bend down, wait. When a ball got hit and it didn't go over, you ran in, got the ball, and came out. Well, I did that for 8 hours, and I blew my knee out.
Messed your knee up.
Yeah.
So we took you in to have your knee surgery. Well, first of all, because you were under 18, I was allowed to go back in that room. They put you on the gurney, and then they take you back into the room right before they take you into surgery. And I was allowed to go back with you into that room. And the nurse came in, chit-chatting, and she has her chart, and she pulls your gown up and exposes your knee, and she writes something on there. And I look down, there's a big marker with an X on there. And I said, what is that X for? I didn't know what that marker of an X was. She said, well, that's where they're going to be doing the surgery on that knee right in that spot. I said, that's not the knee that she hurt. And the nurse said, oh, yes, it is. The chart says that that's the knee that the surgery needs to be done on. I said, no, it's the other knee. And you looked up and you said, it's the other knee. And the nurse was very flustered at this point. She wasn't believing us. It's like, we don't know which knee is hurt. She said, well, let me go, talk to the doctor. And if I hadn't seen that X on there, you would have had knee surgery on the wrong knee.
Yep.
It was just, sometimes I am just amazed how God, intervenes on these things, and just the timing on some of this stuff.
Although now I'm kind of wishing I would have had knee surgery on both, but
So, well, you went ahead and had the knee surgery. Okay, this was supposed to be like a 3-day thing. You pop in and have it fixed, and then you take and are out of commission for a few days, and everything's fine. Oh no, our life wouldn't be that simple. She had a brace from her hip all the way down to her ankle. How many months did you have that brace on? I can't remember.
It was like 9 months.
I was going to say it was a year.
I had the big brace on. I had the big brace on for like 4 or 5 months. But then I had a littler brace that I had to wear for what equaled another year after that.
It turned out to be a nightmare. Okay, to put this into perspective of what we had to go through, we got her home from the hospital, and she had to go to the bathroom. Oh, I don't know why I'm on the toilet this time, but it just happened.
The show has just gone down the toilet.
I know, it would just happen. So I take her in the bathroom, and it's so tiny. You've got to realize the toilet was like 5 inches from the wall when you sat on it. Your knees were 5 inches from the wall.
To explain, we lived in an old Victorian house that was built. I don't think they had indoor plumbing, did they, when it was built? Maybe?
No, I don't. That bathroom was added on later on.
I think that bathroom was like a pantry or something originally.
Yeah, and it went under the staircase, so it was really low. And
okay, so that was Mike's dentist calling. So he's scooting out of here, and we'll finish with Mom and I.
So she had this brace on, and we were in the bathroom, and it was like something out of a comedy show, because she couldn't put her leg, if she sat on the toilet, it couldn't go straight. If she turned it this way, she tried lifting the leg up over the bathtub, because the bathtub was only about 6 inches from the toilet, if that, 4 inches from the toilet. So she couldn't angle her leg up to go over the bathtub.
Not to mention it hurt horrendously to lift my leg.
So here we were, the two of us, like these octopuses, trying to juggle her. Then we started laughing. And you know, when you get to giggling and laughing, then we couldn't function hardly at all, just trying to get her on to the toilet. And I'm telling you this because this was our life on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, you know, dealing with this stuff. So the knee surgery really put a monkey wrench in a lot of things in our life at this point. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that she had walked to school, rode her bike to school, which is a mile away, but she would have things where she'd have to come home early or go at a different time or something, and I would be at work. And I could take a whole day off of work, but I couldn't take like an hour to drive home and do whatever she needed to do and get back. So I had nobody to pick her up, nobody to take her, and I was starting to get a little bit stressed trying to figure out how to deal with this. Well, one day the pastor's wife walked in and she was taken over. She would come in and then take my place. And she said, "Would you be interested in another job?" When I say these jobs just came to me, they did. And I said, "Well, what kind of a job?" And she said, "Well, there's a counseling center. My daughter-in-law is working for this counseling center, and she's receptionist, and she's leaving there, and they're going to need somebody to replace her." Well, why she asked me about this job instead of me just staying where I was, I hadn't mentioned this. Like I said, in all these videos, we couldn't cover everything, but for the past 2 years, from the past 2 years, I had been studying very hard to do family counseling. I would go in 2 days a week, add it to my schedule. You know, I didn't have enough to do. So I'd go in 2 days a week for 2 hours each day. And I had a really good counselor who he'd grill me and drill me and test me. And then he'd send me home with this huge stack of books that I have to read and study. And then I go back and do it again because they had an opening at the church and he was needing a woman counselor. So he was training me to take that over and eventually go into family counseling to help him with, you know, because the women wanted a woman a lot of times for counseling. And he wanted somebody when he did couples counseling too often. So I was training to try to take that over. Well, this job was at a counseling center, and the pastor's wife thought that would be a good opportunity for me to see if I really wanted to do this, to get my foot in the door, kind of. And I prayed about it, and the only thing was I was going to get paid like $1 less an hour if I took this job. But it was 3 minutes from our house and 5 minutes from the school. I could go pick you up whenever you needed to and do that. So that weighed really heavy because I always made it a point. I didn't care what job I had. The kids, if they needed me for something to be there, I would get rid of the job so I could do whatever you needed, you know, really, because that was my top priority. And I still had the piano business as my main income. So really, you know, $1 an hour. Well, I wouldn't get the loan paid off as soon, but that was more important to be able to be there for you, especially because at this point I didn't know it, but it was continuing into a year almost. So I told my boss that I was going to leave. And I prayed about it enough that I really had peace. I thought God wanted me to do this counseling job. I really did. And I had real good peace about it. And the next day, my boss says, "Okay, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to leave." He said, "So I talked it over with the head honchos, and I'm going to give you a pay raise." Now, I can't remember exactly how much I made, but it would be equal to nowadays if you were making $10 an hour, and then your boss says, "Okay, I'm going to pay you $15 an hour." That's a big chunk pay raise. And he said, "I'm going to give you a pay raise. We give none of our part-timers benefits whatsoever, but I'm going to give you full medical, full dental, full eyeglass. It was really good insurance for all of this. I'd had, for me, no insurance up to this point. And I'll give you all of that." He said, too, that, he said, "I'll kick in a life insurance policy. So that anything happens to you, we'll pay for this life insurance policy for you, for your kids to have if something happens to you. And you'll get 2 weeks vacation. I'm thinking, this is the best of all. I'd never had a paid vacation. I'm 65 years old. I've never once worked at any job where I had a paid vacation. And this was just like, way to go. And so, okay, do I keep this other job or do I go over here? I'm trying to, but I wanted to give this example to you to show you there are times when we know pretty much what God's will is for us in our lives. And we make up our mind to go that direction. It's a given. There's going to be some temptation. Something's going to come along that's going to tempt you to go the other way, not to go that direction. And this was one of those times. And I was so tempted to stay there, but I said, no, I really feel I need to go to this other job. So I'm all set. I'm going for the job interview now. You guys are going to love this part. My boss, even though I didn't stay there, wrote me this rave review. I had a letter from my pastor with unbelievable review because it was a Christian counseling center. So that's why all of these kind of helped. The counselor that was training me to do the counseling stuff, he wrote me a rave review. The pastor's wife gave her recommendation. And on top of that, I had trained as an AT&T operator, which held a lot of clout back then because that was one of the best training you can get for telephones back then. So this guy's looking, I'm at the interview, and he's saying, oh my, he said, you're way overqualified for our job. We'd be so lucky to get you. He said, this is unbelievable. He said, I never dreamed God would send somebody with all this, this good referral and everything. He was so excited and going on and on. Pretty soon he says, well, tell me a little bit about you, about your life. He said, are you married? Do you have kids? What's your, that type of thing. And I said, well, I have 2 children. And I am in the process of getting a divorce. And his features just totally changed. The atmosphere in the room changed. And he looked at me. He said, you're getting a divorce? You're going to be divorced? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, oh, well, I'm sorry. I can't hire you. I mean, even back then, there was enough women's lib stuff going on that this was unheard of. I had never heard of anybody not hiring somebody because they were divorced. I mean, how many of you out there have heard of that? This is bizarre. Of course, I'm used to this stuff by now, And when he said it, he said, I just can't hire you. I'm in such a state of shock. I didn't even really react. I sat there and I said, oh, well.
Your grandkids are in the background listening to this like, what?
No, really. I didn't even know how to react to him. And I said, well, all right, thank you. I said, I really thought I'd be a good worker, but, that's fine. And I stood up and with dignity, I walked out of that room. I didn't cower. I didn't feel downtrodden.
Ellie's back there going.
Well, I didn't do that. I really didn't even have an attitude, though. I wasn't mad at him. I wasn't angry. I didn't think, well, seriously, really? Who are you? I didn't even have any of that. I think I was just so shocked. It was unbelievable. Now, I walked out of there. I drove home the 3 minutes it took me to drive home, and I went and fixed me lunch. I mean, it was the dumbest thing. I didn't even give it a second thought. And I'm fixing my lunch, and about 15, 20 minutes later, the phone rings. And it's the guy that I'd interviewed with. And he said, please don't hang up the phone on me. Yeah. He said, even though I deserve it, he said, don't hang the phone up. He said, I'm calling to apologize. I'm calling to grovel. He said, I don't even know to ask your forgiveness. He said, I don't even know what I can do to say I'm sorry. He said, when you walked out of the office, I realized right away what I'd done. I called my wife. I called my business partner. They read me the riot act and called me all kinds of a fool, which I already figured out I'd been. And he said, we need you so bad. Will you please come work for us?
Which one was it? Just the first name?
Steve.
See, I thought it was Steve.
And I said, yeah, I will. Now, I'm telling you this because I could have walked out of that office thinking, I'm going to take this guy to court. I'm going to sue him. How dare he? This is unfair. This is wrong. I didn't. I had so much on my plate at this point. I couldn't emotionally afford to get involved in something like that. But it made me think that the Bible talks about God will vindicate us, that he will fight our enemies for us, and he'll take care of these things. And usually when he does it, it's in a better way where a lot of people don't get hurt. And that's exactly what God had done for me, because I didn't react in anger or demand my rights or say, this is unfair. Who are you? Because I didn't react that way. I just left it with God and said, well, I thought you wanted me to have this job, but I don't know what's going on here. So you just take care of it, basically, is what I was thinking. And then this is what happened. And that's how it gives us more peace in our life when we start allowing God to take care of these things. I could not go back to that life anymore. I couldn't do it. Once you have this peace, whether it's getting peace with your finances, getting peace with the stress in your family from doing too much stuff and going all the time, any of these things, I don't think most of us have ever truly experienced peace and a comfort in knowing there's somebody bigger, stronger, and mightier than us taking care of things. We're so busy demanding our rights. I want it my way. I've got to take care of this myself, that we're wearing ourselves out and stressing ourselves out. But once you feel that peace, then there's no going back. You don't go back for any reason. You try not to go back, and that type of thing. I think we'll go ahead and end this tape, because some of the things, once I get into this job, I meet some people that when we get sick and when things happen, big influence. So I'm going to stop here for this video and then just continue on later on.
Okay. Yeah, I was hobbling around for a long time with that.
I didn't think you were ever going to get that cast off, ever.
Yeah, and the only way actually I finally got better was I went to Sweden to be an exchange student after high school. So this was 2 years later. And back there they don't drive anywhere, they walk everywhere. And I was forced to walk, and I finally was able to walk it enough to where I was able to get going again. But my dad's side of the whole family, everybody, my brother, everybody, nobody has knees that work.
Yeah. David, to this day, he just limps, even though he's had surgery and stuff. So
my poor brother's had surgery and has cadavers in his knee, and it's just not, he just can't hardly function. So all right, please visit us at livingoutoftime.com on that cheery note. And please like, share, and watch our videos as long as you can, because it really helps us out. So we will see you on the next episode of Penny Pinch and Mama.